role with other stakeholders in the sector to develop a collegiate approach to sustain the work of Ireland's contemporary photographic artists, thereby promoting some fantastically great Irish artists. The National Photography Collection is supported by generous philanthropic donations, and though they have expressly wished to remain anonymous, so you're not getting your hands on them, we still want to acknowledge them publicly and to salute their part in developing a culture of private giving here in Ireland. We are deeply honoured that the President of Ireland, Michael D. Higgins, has agreed to be patron of the collection, and we look forward to welcoming him and Sabina to the gallery when circumstances permit. The collection exhibition, which is over in the gallery, is one part of the In Our Own Image year-long programme presenting the first comprehensive survey of photography in Ireland. That exhibition continues the story of photography, beginning with this overview, historical overview exhibition here has been presented in partnership with the Office of Public Works, Dublin Castle, and it continues until the 6th of February. Finally, I'd like to say thank you to the Office of Public Works and Dublin Castle for their support for that programme, and in particular Mary Heffernan, Miles Campbell, Christian Fee, and thanks also to Declan, Kiang and James Tech team here at Printworks. We are also grateful for support from the Department of Tourism, Culture, Arts, Building, Floor and Media, Dublin City Council, and our co-founder, the Arts Council. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Tricia.
Thank you, Tanya. If we could just ask you to switch off your mobile phones, that would be great. Thank you very much. So we're delighted to have this opportunity to start this conversation with artists. We have sent out an artist survey, so if you haven't already filled it in, it would be really great if you could get back to us with your thoughts and ideas on what you currently do to manage your own work and your archive, and what type of supports you think are needed to put in place, ways to safeguard artist practice both now and for the future. So I'm delighted to introduce from my right to my left, Dragner Urichic, who many of you will know. We've had the pleasure of showing Dragner as part of our Reframing the Border programme. We've also shown your solo exhibition, and Dragner's work is held in collections in Ireland and around the world, and she's one of our best known contemporary artists. We're delighted to welcome Jailin Long. We had the pleasure of working with Jailin as part of our Diversity Commission, which was supported by Dublin City Council and Creative Ireland, and that was shown on billboards and digi-panels around the city at the start of last year, wasn't it? Yes, I can lose track of time with COVID. And finally, Anthony Haughey, who is a socially engaged artist, and his work is also being exhibited widely. He's currently the artist in resident in the National Museum of Ireland, Collins Barracks, and actually across all the sites, isn't that right? And Anthony's work is also held in numerous collections nationally and internationally. So we're really glad that you could join us here today. This will be a very informal first kind of toe in the water on this discussion, and it's a discussion we hope to expand out over the coming months and year. We will also be consulting individually with artists who have different types of practices, and it will all feed into our own development of the collection. So we really want this to be an artist-led collection as it develops. And as part of that, we will also be following the Museum Standards Association process of building the collection to the proper archival standards. So I have a number of questions. It'll be a very short discussion today, but very briefly, and we'll start with Dragner and work this way, if that's all right. So Dragner, could you explain, how do you currently maintain your archive and manage your files?
Really badly. No, I mean, I teach now in TCU, and one of the first lectures we have with the students is file naming and how to store files. And I wish someone told me that 20 years ago when I started, because maybe my files make some sense to an archivist if they and studios in Dublin. So sometimes when studios become available, they're not fit for purpose, and maybe sometimes I could think the locations like that would really be turned into storage for artists, because we are really struggling. And I'll bring one more thing that is my personal concern in the last few years, and that is, how do I limit the amount of work I put out in the world? Because I don't think in the world we live today it's responsible to make, works that are mounted and framed some giant size, unless the commission and there is a specific place where they're going to. So I'm also going to be considering how I can distill my work down to not a huge volumes. Can one image say more than 30 put together, basically?
Yeah.
So that are some of my concerns.
Right. And Jolene, how is your archive and file management?
Well, for the physical one, it's just on a bookshelf. And I also have the same problem. I find like my room, my house is more and more starting to run out of space, so I don't know what to do. Then digitally, I just like my folder made by years, so I know if I look back some work and I have first to remember which year I made, and I try to find them. So.
And Anthony?
I think we're all pretty bad at archiving. That would be fair to say. The very least that I try to do is, with analog work, it's all stored in ACID-free boxes. It's not compiled. It's project by project. So I've got an idea of where to find things, but it's certainly not indexed. It's certainly not annotated in any way. It's not fit for, let's say, retrieval systems, which is really at the heart of it. But there's lots of examples where it is done really well. And then we come to digital. I was just making a list of the various kind of artifacts that, there's colleagues in the room who are, a little bit older than me maybe, who, will have their own systems as well. But when you think about the archive, it's not just negatives. It's not just contact sheets and prints. It's all the publications that one's work has appeared in. It's notebooks. It's hard drives. It's also managing the cloud on behalf of, say, an artist. That's all part of the archive. And so on and so on. It's kind of endless. But it seems to me that we need expertise around the protocols. And if I can just give one example, sorry, I don't want to take up too much time. I was just kind of looking at this a bit more closely, and the really good example is Daniel Meadows. Some of you will know Daniel Meadows. He's an English photographer. Sorry?
Yeah, we showed him the gallery in 2007. Yeah.
Well, originally Birmingham Library were going to take his archive, and it's an interesting story. And then it throws up an immediate issue about how one finances an archive, because it collapsed through financial cutbacks. They could no longer give public access, so the whole thing fell apart very quickly. He got really lucky because Oxford University, the Bodleian Library of all places, imagine, has taken his whole archive. But the real moral of the story is, it took him 6 years to actually prepare the archive for the Bodleian. And that meant, the key thing was not so much the material, because, that can be gathered together, but it was really, as he said, it was writing notes, and what he meant was indexing, numerical systems that would enable retrieval of the archive and things like that. So we all have these informal ways to keep it, but that doesn't add up to much.
Well, one thing we want to do with this is we undertake the training ourselves, because we're learning too. It's all new to us, and I don't think our archives are, we're starting. We've taken on new staff last year as part of this history research to actually build back our own archives, because we didn't even have our own archives. It's because, you go through various different iterations. You change the technology, you go from one website to another, or it's in a hard drive or something else. So we ourselves are only in the process of coming to terms with our own legacy. But one thing we want to do is to avail of the great expertise that's out there in the other stakeholder organisations and institutions. We were talking to Joanne Finnegan from the National Library, you know, and so it'd be bringing people like Joanna to talk about, you know, the systems that they recommend. And the one point that we were talking to her last week on this very point, and she's in charge of digital archiving, but she was saying you have to have a physical copy as well. So this is why we're thinking that that may be a portfolio set. So we're very much not about collecting pieces, but making sure that there's a legacy record of key bodies of work so that it doesn't get lost. And the area of artist storage is one that comes up again and again and again, and the sustainability of producing large handsome pieces that aren't necessarily archivally safe or that take a massive amount of money. I mean, Endebo, for example, suggested that Carlo could be a great place with cheap storage for artists to collectively arrange to get a climatically controlled space that might be shared. And I think sometimes it would be great as well if there could be longer term studios, because the housing of works and collections and archives is a real issue if you have to do it at home.
I mean, I was very fortunate to go, you know, from Fire Station to INMA to Temple Park Gallery Studios.
Yeah.
But every time I move my archive and my works, like, they're not, it's not sound, you know, something will break or get lost in a move. So I'm really worried about that. And also digital storage is highly problematic. I'm constantly migrating my work from one, you know, hard drive to another. And I don't really believe in the stability of digital files long term.
Well, this is the point Joanna was saying, they're not stable. That's the difficulty, they're not stable. I mean, we already have our artist production facilities, you know, and we want to kind of develop them so that we will then turn that into an artist, you know, production and archiving space. And I suppose the question I would have then is, you know, if we develop a series of artist archiving residencies, you know, where we can agree that we work with a certain number of people over a given period of time, would you want to do the scanning and post-production, you know, clearing of dust yourselves to create the final record, or is that something that you would like to delegate to someone to do, but to oversee?
No, I wouldn't.
No, you wouldn't. What?
I mean, I would consider. I mean, I know how to do it. Absolutely know how to do it. I teach it, but I don't want to do it. Okay. And the reason I don't, it's not that I don't want to do it. It's time. You don't have time. I mean, I've realised you constantly making new work, and just coming back to the point you made earlier, an archive has absolutely zero value sitting on a hard drive or a cloud, unless, take photography as an example, unless there's an associated print made that is an object, that is an artifact, then you've got something to work with. Without that, it's absolutely meaningless. And added to that, you also need some kind of textual context around it as well. Again, otherwise it's has no value. It hasn't, and I don't mean value in the sense of monetary value, because you know we can make a distinction between collections and archives. But I mean value in terms of you know, this is the interesting thing about photography, because researchers come to photography from lots of different positions. They might be interested in material culture. They might be interested in fashion. They might be interested in a particular period that photography and visual representation covers, but you know, and that's the real, for me, that's the real kind of richness of this. But you know, and coming back to Daniel's example, I think he had like 2 museum curators advising him all the way through this about how to go about it. So it's really about, you know, there's an ethical aspect to this as well. If a photographer or an artist dies, the archive may or may not continue to exist, but there's an ethical responsibility for whoever takes it on to ensure that its public access is in a context that was, you know, I suppose generated or wanted by the artist, the photographer at that time. That's really important as well.
Jolene?
Yeah, well, I did the survey, by the way, earlier, so I was just thinking when I did one of the questions when I answered in the survey, I hope like there is some sort of a user-friendly interface, and then you can link to like a database, is like cloud storage for your work, and with an easy index. So if there's something structure built in there, I'd love to use that. It's like say, for example, for the work I'm doing, I do both like analog and digital, but I always scan my negatives, and they will be archived digitally. And I'd love to have somewhere like organized and safe, because I know it's not safe in my laptop.
Yeah.
And like when you run out space, you have to move from one hard drive to a different one. It's like thousands of photos. You can't really watch which one did it really copy everything, or maybe when I wiped one disk, my old disk, then I realized like you see those squares, in the digital files, and the image is cracked.
So this is something we're hoping that we would do. I mean, an example of this would be Photohof in Salzburg, have an artist archive collection, a small portfolio box with a print version and a system to give an overview of, and you build it small and you build it out, but that would be an ultimate goal, to do something along those lines, which would be great. And Dragner, for you already come in and use our scanning facilities.
I do, yes. And I mean, it would be great if someone I know how to do it, but there are people who know how to do it better.
Yeah.
And I find spotting and cleaning my negatives of dust quite meditative.
Yeah.
And a great excuse not to have to do other stuff. Yeah, I think it would be better with my time to do something else.
Yeah, no, I
And we're lucky
Use
that we have, one of the only kind of public accessible high-end Hasselblad scanners. So that is a key resource. We're lucky. And getting a service, I know. And as part of this, this is something that we don't want to be in any way restrictive about. If we work with artists to make these archival, high-end, professional quality scans, that is something that we're going to follow up in the following conversation. That would be available then, that artists can then have that to produce prints for collections, for art pieces, and for publications, and to work with other organisations to help develop and promote Irish photography.
think there's a rationale for, you can rationalise how to do it. I've been thinking about it a lot, and at the very least, if you've made, a lot of photographers work in this way. They work in series, or they make a body of work, an extended body of work. Some of that gets exhibited. I've noticed more recently that tend to go straight from files to exhibition prints, and then you're left with really nothing. I would argue exhibition prints are useless because they're often mounted on substrates that will just destroy the photograph eventually, no matter how good it is. And the issue of space, you can't really store them. I did something with the National Gallery of Ireland recently and made kind of two things. It was a series of exhibition prints and a portfolio, but I was able to print that portfolio myself, so that was really important to me as well, because I don't like using labs. It's a kind of necessary evil, but you don't. I want to kind of do that myself. So at the very least, I think what could happen is key images from analog could be scanned. The main body of work could be printed and a reasonable portfolio size, and in that way, at the very least, you've got a really good solid trace of key projects, and I think that would be a good start.
Great. Okay. Well, I think we'll finish there, unless anybody has any kind of concluding.
I just think, if say, I don't need to worry about money, I don't need to worry about space, I'd like to make big prints. I think it's, if you say we all move to digital, and what's the point to make sculpture? So we still need physical things.
Sure.
Yeah, but I guess the physical print, what we're thinking of, we're not getting into the area of making art pieces that are collectors' artworks. We're thinking much more of an archival trace, and we leave the collecting of lovely big artworks to the organisations who do that very well, the National Gallery of Ireland, Irish Museum of Modern Art, and those kind of collecting things. So I think it's not an either or from our end of things, but I think it's going to be different for every artist, and there won't be one size fits all. I think it'll be an individual dialogue with each artist to see what they're...
Can I say something controversial?
No.
It's about money.
Yeah.
Okay? So there's an assumption that everybody's archive is worth money. And I didn't know, but I was just kind of researching this today, actually. Daniel gave his whole archive for free. not free, because the real finance comes from the institution that decides to support it. If there's guaranteed public access and that institution is going to enable researchers, going to exhibit that work, going to ensure that it remains public, that's where the real costs are.
Yeah.
So the question for people, for repositories, if you like, whether that's a gallery photography, the National Gallery, whoever, it doesn't matter. You know, it's to what extent is the archive perceived? So the things that we listed, is it hard drives? Is it publications? Is it all of those things? Or, you know, what are the repositories actually interested in? And what is their commitment to collecting, if you say, you know, a whole, you know, it's a life's work, right?
Yeah. Great. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Dragner. Thank you, Janine. Thank you, Anthony. We're going to hand over to my colleagues, Darren and Dan. We're going to give a very brief kind of insight into our case study into this process. Dan has been working with Tony O'Shea over a period of 2 years to digitise his archive. Now that's a real luxury, because that's not something we will be able to offer artists, because there are so many wonderful contemporary Irish artists that we simply won't have the time unless we get a massive grant to do so. So Daniel and Dan, I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Hello everybody, thank you for coming. The case study we're going to talk about is Tony O'Shea, someone I think you're probably all familiar with, and someone who we've become very close to over the last couple of years. We spent a lot of time with him. So Darren, what do you think?
Yeah, so as Trish was saying, one of the things that sort of put us down this road of thinking about artists' archives and the way we might, if you like, activate all this material that they have was working with Tony, and looking back at this material he had accumulated over a very long career. I'm sure everyone will be familiar with Tony O'Shea, but this material he had accumulated over a very long working life as a photographer. And because he was a working photographer, he didn't always have the time necessarily to go back and look at his archive and to sort of make sense of it and to produce a definitive overview of these projects that he made and the series that he worked on. So he came to the gallery in order to, I suppose, in the first instance, transfer from that analog space to the digital space, and that was one of the things we sort of facilitated for him, wasn't it?
Yeah, to take, like Tony's well versed in how to make a print in the darkroom. He's extremely proficient in how to operate a camera and how to capture life as we know it. But where he didn't have the skill set was to bring that work into the current age, to make it accessible, to make it the work that he wanted it to be. Now, traditionally, he would have made prints himself, or he would have had relationships with specialists in darkrooms. But now, once work is digitised, he wants to be able to transfer the nuances that he used to have between him and the print in the darkroom, or him and the actual skilled darkroom printer, into what became the finished digital file. So you create a scan with us, but not only that, once you make the initial scan, we operate by the mantra, scan it right and it'll be all right. And the idea is that you kind of discover the nuances within each negative, that you interrogate each negative to get every element of it digitized, to give you the latitude then in post-production to dodge, to burn, to exploit areas of the negative that previously may not have even been seen in darkroom prints. So that brings a whole new level to how artists like Tony engage with their work that they were familiar with before suddenly becomes new again with the possibilities that digitalization offers and the output that comes to that.
And he's very much someone who knows what he wants in terms of the print he's going to make. And also he knows what images he wants to find from his archive, because he's already produced, like, he's familiar with the work he's made, but then also in the process of going back to find those earlier images, he might also have discovered new images that the process of digitization enabled him to see essentially for the first time.
Yeah, there was limitations that he would have met previously in the darkroom that suddenly aren't limits anymore.
Yeah.
That he realises once he sees what we can do at one level on one particular negative with one image, that in terms of how he presents the work, and it's a real honour to get to work with him to that level. but it does open up a world of possibilities to people that previously worked in a solely analog world to see what's possible in digital.
And the starting point for all that is the quality of the scan that we're able to make from his negative.
Absolutely, rubbish in, rubbish out. If it's, you know, a good quality scan does not make good work, but a good quality scan of good work does allow you, as I say, the latitude to really varnish it and to show it up for the jewel that it really is, and to allow a wider audience to engage with it, be it, yes, in the traditional print form, but also across media platforms and in different ways of presenting it, be it a presentation or a projection, or it could be something as simple as the first series he did with us were scans for the CRB, the Café Royal books series. He did 5 of those, I think. And it was from seeing that then talk started with him between him and RRB for the production of The Light of Day. And he's currently working on the next book that's coming.
So the process of digitising his archive really enabled this work, a lot of this work, to reach a new audience, to be seen for the first time, and it also made possible these publications because he hadn't digitised anything before really in a substantial way. Like those publications with Café Royal books, there's this, like I say, a series, they wouldn't have been possible without his archive being digitised. This is a lot of work that hasn't been seen before as a series in a lot of cases, right?
Yeah, that was the genesis for where we find ourselves now.
Yeah.
But, you know, there is, like most of the photographers that are in the room, there's an endless pit of work that could be engaged with, but it's the selection of and creating a series from those that makes it into the consumable item that we have.
And because he was working photographer his whole life, he didn't have the time or the resources to go back and look at all these projects that he had made, but now, having digitised them, he's able to get them out into the world in a different way in all these publication formats like Café Royal, but also like the book with RRB, and he reaches a whole new audience, and he sees we're almost seeing his work for the first time in some ways. Everybody's familiar with Dubliners, but there are a lot of projects there that were unseen, and actually digitising the archive kind of activates it. It's not just something we're making to put aside, to go in. It's not a museum piece.
No,
it's something that now has a whole new audience because it was, like I said, activated as an archive.
Everything we're doing has been selected by him with the intention of it being presented. None of the work that we've produced thus far has been made specifically for archive. It's meant for audience. It, of course, it does end up in the archive because it's been digitised and reproduced for the various publications and for the forthcoming exhibition that he's going to have. But that's a coincidence that they become archived. It would be wonderful to be able to archive everything, but there is no necessity for that, or there's no will to do that at the moment, or the resources at the time aren't there to do it.
And I think when we say archive, I mean, he has his archive, it's there, he knows where things are. It wasn't that case of organising the material, it was the case of actually pulling them out from the archive and
He's a
recreating
lot more
it.
organised than a lot of the digital artists that are working there today. He have his own Da Vinci code, if you like, for how.
And if anybody else can follow it, we're not really sure, but he knows where things
He
are.
knows where things are.
And it's the first. But at the same time, even knowing where things are, the process of, like I said, the process of looking for those things has revealed other material that he'd overlooked, and it has enabled the creation of these new series.
Yeah, of course. Like anything, when we see the potential of technologies, it broadens our perspective as to how we can engage with those and the benefits that we can accrue from that. So things that you thought previously weren't possible or wouldn't have met the same level of standard or quality standard that you would have thought. Suddenly, these tools make these goals achievable.
Possible, yeah.
And then it broadens your perspective as to what could be considered part of a series. What could be
And it sort of, it puts all this unseen material back in the public domain in some ways, because it's out there now. You can even follow him on Instagram, which I highly recommend. But it's also the books and the publications that he will be able to make into the future. And it really changes our perspective on that period in Irish photography, because it gives us a much wider view. You know what I mean?
It definitely brings it to a new audience that weren't aware of who he was before he started making more publications with CRB, that may have heard about Dubliners but never seen a copy of it.
Sure.
So it's an ongoing project.
So I think we're actually going to draw to a close there, but it's very interesting to discuss, and I hope we'll be able to bring more of Tony's work and other photographers' work to the fore in the same way, in the same sort of thorough way that we were able to do with Tony's. So yeah.
Thank you, Darren. Thank you, Dan. So as I say,
So you're going to be basically talking while this is playing, is that it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, the only thing is, I'm interviewing to my eyesight is good. All right, where is this?
So any questions? So what I'm going to do is, I'm just going to talk this, my presentation is kind of 3 sections. First section I'm going to talk through how this work came about, and then I'm going to talk about the technology, NFTs, and then I'm going to talk about the collectors. So please bear with me. So my name is Building Artists Legacies, and I was the curator on this program. I suppose the person kind of drove it within the gallery. So think back to last April, and we had a bit of a panic in the gallery because of obviously COVID, as many of us had. We were in a situation where we had to shut the gallery down. Gallery basically delivers on its mission to support you guys by bringing you into the space. So when we stopped panicking, we thought, okay, well, we can move the bookshop online, we can deliver some of our programs through Zoom, but what we thought, so where do we put our focus? What do we need? What do we need to do as a cultural institution to still deliver on the professional development that we think we provide for the photographers and the photographers we support? So one of the things that we realised we couldn't do anymore was exhibitions. Exhibitions, at least the way that we had done them. We feel that, obviously you guys know better than I, that an exhibition is important to artist development. What it does is it's an important waypoint. So what we wanted to do is, could we deliver the question we asked ourselves? Could we deliver an equivalent experience in a virtual context that we deliver to the photographers when they come in and they curate a show at the gallery? So the first thing we did is we asked the artists. So we pulled a bunch of artists that we supported into a Zoom call, well, a series of Zoom calls, and we basically got their feedback. So the question was, what do you feel is the benefit, and how are the benefits borne for running an exhibition at the gallery? And they were pretty clear. They were able to articulate the one thing was the space, the production that they get when they make prints with Dan was very much prized. Money was always good, but money wasn't the most important thing. Promotion, which I thought would be very important, was actually quite low down, and then the curation. So what we found was that the other thing that an exhibition does is it connects artists to their audience and to others. So at the same time, we looked at the context within which that we were addressing now. So obviously we COVID, I touched on that earlier, and what that meant was that we could end up in a situation where we weren't bringing people into the gallery. So how could we still connect to an audience? And then right in the middle of this, as this was kicking off, this story was erupting all over the news. We'd been following this in the gallery since probably December 2020, and then in March, or February, March 2021, this Beeble sale happened at Christie's. And we thought, okay, so if we're going to look at digital or being digital, where the project was going at the time, we thought, we should really include an NFT aspect within the project. So the other big thing that was happening around the time was collectives. So collaboration in the arts was becoming a big story. Last year, 5 of the Turner nominees were cooperatives, and we thought, okay, so collaboration is something that we should really, really investigate if we're doing something new. So what we thought is, okay, so we can create an experimental program, and what we'll try and do is we'll help artists make art and reach audience with their work. That's their objective, and that's the same objective we have when we show in the gallery. We target early and mid-career artists, and then we thought, okay, we don't want them to make new work because they have an archive, they have an ongoing project, and we thought, well, maybe we could breathe some new life into a project that may have some unfinished aspects of it. And then we thought, okay, so how do we bring in the collaborative element? And then because it was digital, we thought, okay, well, if we pair the visual artists with composers, that might be interesting. So what we would provide is money and support, and then we thought we'll try and get a physical exhibition if we can make it happen, but we can certainly make an exhibition. There wasn't even a metaverse being spoken about last year, but we thought, well, we can do a virtual exhibition. And then in order to make this happen and to hopefully help the artists make a sale and get some traction in the space, we wanted to hook in a network of experts and influencers who could help the artists actually create this work. And then finally, we'd help them mint an NFT and then market the NFT. So we started last September, and we started with an open call, and then we did an artist selection, and then we ran a structured mentoring process, and we got the collaborations going, and then we opened the exhibitions, and from tomorrow we'll be trying to drive the sale. So to make this happen, we needed tons of partners, and for us, this really was just an idea, and it wouldn't have happened if we couldn't have gotten these people on board. So the way that I saw getting these people on board was, it was like a proof point. If we couldn't get the people we needed, or the organizations we needed to support the project couldn't happen. So we had to get people from the tech space, so we had to get a minting platform. Just a show of hands, have any of you minting or following that story, the NFT story at all? Okay, right, well, good, we'll talk about that in a minute. Then we want to get exhibition partners, so we got the RCC in Letterkenny. They came on board very early. They brought us the composers. They brought us tons of competencies that we didn't have in the gallery. We also got MoCA, which is the Museum of Crypto Art, on board. And MoCA provided invaluable expertise about the domain, the NFT domain. And then we also got the Foundation for Art and Blockchain to come on board, and they supplied us with the cryptocurrency that we needed to actually mint and produce the work. And then obviously our other funding partners with the Nerve Centre, the Department of Culture, and the Arts Council. So what we did is we put out our open call, and again, to hook in the network, what we wanted to do is we wanted to get a bunch of interesting curators and influencers in the space. So on there's Sven Eisenhut. So Sven Eisenhut runs Basel Photo, and we had Ben Fuglister, who is an editor of European Photography. And then obviously we brought in some of the crypto experts. So Colburn Bell, he's the founder of MoCA and one of the main collectors in the space, and his curator Shivani, and then Charles Damga from the Foundation platform came in and supported us as well. And then we had the usual suspects, Trish, Jeremy from the RCC, Michael Weir from Belfast Photo, and Niall Kerr from the Nerve Centre in Derry. So what we did is, the way often these programs work, you've got to magpie. So what I mean by that is we joined a bunch of programs together to actually make sure that we had the funding to execute the project. So the way that worked is we had funding for 2 artists to do a collaboration, and we pulled those guys in. Kieran is over there. And then we 3 artists were selected from the open call, and then we had the 5 invited composers, which was organised by Jeremy in the RCC. So the first thing we did is we ran a design sprint. A design sprint is like a 2-day virtual boot camp where we got the photographers and the composers. They hadn't met each other. We stuck them in a very long Zoom call, and then we just threw experts at them to kind of indoctrinate them into the space. So what we had is we had Larry, the gentleman on the lower corner is Dr. Larry Taylor, who's a social media expert. He came in, provided advice. We had Trish, we had Colburn again, talking about MoCA and the collector experience. We had Charles from Foundation, which is the NFT minting platform, to talk about what that means. And then we had this brilliant guy called Robert Keenan, who's a real thinker in the space, very smart guy in the bottom right corner, who kind of navigated us through the whole crypto world. And then we ended up pulling together 3 exhibitions. So we have the exhibition in the RCC, we had a virtual exhibition in MoCA. Philip is down here, he's going to show you something later where this is all going. And then we had a projection and a talk in the gallery. So I'm just going to talk very briefly about NFTs. So are they the future of art? And the answer is maybe. That is pretty much where we are. But do you guys know what an NFT is? Okay, well I'll start. An NFT or it stands for non-fungible token, and you probably have all heard of Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is the difference between a Bitcoin or Ethereum and an NFT is that each NFT is unique and each Bitcoin is identical. So a Bitcoin is like a euro in your pocket. 1 euro is the same as the next euro, is the same as your next euro, is the same as the next euro. With an NFT, each one is different, each one is unique. And that is why it's so really interesting. So what it enables you to do, which we haven't been able to do since the 80s, since digitization started happening, is it's allowed us to create digital scarcity. So what you can do is you can actually create a digital file and say that is the original digital file, much like a negative, and then write that to the blockchain. So what that actually says is it describes a chain of custody. So actually writing when you mint a piece of art, what you're doing is you're putting the file in a place called interplanetary file storage. I'm not joking. And then what happens is you create a hash, a cryptographic hash of that file, and then that gets written on the blockchain. And what that means is, it means that at a particular point in time, that file was made by Kieran Dunbar, and then Kieran can transfer or assign that file to someone else. And they can exchange value to do that. So in order for that file to exchange, Kieran could just give it to you, or they could say, I want some money for that, and then that exchange will happen, and then that gets written on the blockchain. So what's really interesting about that is it's this concept of a chain of custody. And the one thing about within contemporary art and all contemporary art, and even about the way we're talking about archiving, is that chain of custody is really, really, really helpful and important in knowing the value and determining whether something is the real thing or not. And there's a couple of tools which are really make it transparent on the blockchain. So when that transaction gets written on the blockchain, it's visible for everyone to see. So I can use this tool on the right called Etherscan, and I can look at, this is Michael Bourne's NFT on OpenSea, and I can see exactly when it was minted, and I can see that it's currently owned by the incubator of crypto art, so it's actually in their wallet at the moment. And there's only one of those files, And I can see it attests to me from the very beginning that this is the artist who made the work, this is where the work is now, and if I want the work, I'll have to buy it. So it's something, it enables this trade in a digital space which previously was impossible. So I'm going to talk about the minting platforms now, and I'm going to show you a very confusing slide. And the reason why I'm just showing you this confusing slide is because not all minting platforms are the same. There's quite a few of them. The two most important ones to my story are OpenSea, because I'll come back to that, and the thing that looks like this thing over here. And the reason why that's important is that's the minting platform we used, and it's called Foundation, and that's a rather confusing logo. But the most important thing, the reason why we chose Foundation as the platform we minted on was because you had to be invited. So many platforms you can just rock up, you pay your money, and you can start minting your work on the platform and distributing it. To Foundation is a curated platform. It's curated by the community, so you actually had to be invited to get onto it. And we were very fortunate to work with the team in Foundation to make that happen. OpenSea is really important because OpenSea is like the Google of NFTs. So the way I would think about OpenSea is OpenSea goes to the blockchain and looks at all the NFTs that are written there, and then creates a little file or a little web page on OpenSea, and you can actually see every NFT that's being minted. Anyway, I'm going to move on. So then we've got the smart contracts, and the interesting thing about a smart contract is it allows you to share ownership. So when we actually minted these, the composers and the photographers actually split they'll split the fee when the work actually sells, and we different. They agreed the splits amongst themselves, and they also gave the gallery 1/10,000th share, and that was just a way of actually recognising the gallery's involvement. Actually, Kiang gave us 2/10,000. He gave us 5,000, right? So I'm just going to. This kind of sums it all up, right? So the interesting thing about NFTs is only one person can own them, but everyone can see them, and that's a bit of a mind that it's difficult for an artist to get their head around that as a concept. And Kaivan Turanian, he's the guy behind Foundation, and he's kind of he basically tells his story about this thing called the Nyan cat, and he talks about this wildly popular meme that was minted by Chris Torres, the artist who created it, and because it was wildly popular, he was able to sell it. So the popularity, the fact that it was highly visible, actually contributed towards the value that eventually made. So this yoke sold last year for $600,000, and it continues to change hands. And every time it changes hands, Chris, because of the smart contract that we didn't speak about a minute ago, he gets his cut, so he gets 15%. So the last thing I'm going to talk about is the collectors. So I want to talk about Sean and Colburn. So Sean Sexton, if you go outside, about 30% of the photographs outside are Sean's photographs, or they come from Sean's collection. And Sean started collecting this stuff in the 80s, vernacular Irish photography, and no one was interested in it. It had little or no value. Now it's incredibly valuable. Colburn started collecting this stuff 2 years ago. He has something he calls the Genesis collection, which is in Mocha, and it's the original stuff, the original early crypto art, and people thought he was mad. He may not be. So what I'm saying is that these things, these contexts change, And as these contexts change and evolve, the way we attribute value changes and evolves. So the one thing I want to leave you with, if we think about collecting as a social game, it gives us a few ways of thinking about the people who actually collect this stuff. And it's an equivalent for Sean Sexton as Colburn Bell, that within a social game, you have to achieve these 4 personality traits. So you have the killer who wants to win in this context. You have the achiever who wants to collect all the tokens in the maze. And again, many collectors are like that. You have the socializer who wants to stand there and brag and tell everyone about the work that they've collected. And this is a space where they can really do that because everyone can see it. And then we have the explorer, and the explorer wants to find new and interesting stuff. So I've run out of time. I'm very sorry. All right, so I'm just going to invite Philip O'Reilly up here, and he's very briefly going to show you where this is going. So this is something that an artist might think about if they wanted to create something in the metaverse. So I'll
All right, can everyone hear me? All right, hello. My name is Philip O'Reilly. I am the owner of VR Link, which is an VR arcade down the Keys. I've been involved in VRs for, I guess, about 16 years, as crazy as that sounds, to say out loud. So you can imagine the number of questions I've been getting about the metaverse and NFTs lately. So yeah, I'm just going to show you a quick video of a model I made after I met him of the gallery. So we all recognize that facade there, yeah? So this is the Unreal Engine. It may look intimidating, but to create this, I'm going to use 3 tools: cubes, booleans, which I won't get into what they are, and materials. So you see here, I am just extruding and changing the shape of this cube, just in and out to get the shape that I want of a wall. And then to get the paint that I wanted for the color for the walls you see behind me, I went into a thing called Quixel Bridge, which is a Quixel are a company that used photogrammetry to get real-world assets and scans from all around the world to give you high-fidelity kind of materials like this, so you can get any picture you want, any surface you want, and apply it to your projects. And it's not just limited to surfaces. There's also assets, 3D assets you see, like ladders and all kinds of things you need for any project that you're doing. So you will see in a second how this all relates to the metaverse. That's me just putting on a material I already had for the walls behind. Unsuccessfully the first time, you'll see. So yeah, so then we get rid of that, because it's not needed for this demonstration, and show you the real reason why this fits into the project that he was talking about with the digital space, because it will play. As you will see, he goes through and you see all the art we saw earlier. Up the stairs. As you will see on this big screen, I am not an artist myself. Lastly, the last stairs. Alright, so the point of that basically was just to show off the free tools you can get straight out of the box, and all that can be put up online and put into VR for the metaverse and all that kind of good stuff as well. So,
Thanks very much for that. All right. Thanks very much, guys.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions? No, good.
Thank you, Paul. I'm not sure I understand it well enough to even form a question, but it's very interesting. No, well done you. So, and now, finally, thank you to all our speakers earlier, and now we move to the second part of today's event, and this is the premiere of Having Regard. Gallery Photography have worked with Kate Nolan since 2017, when we presented the first iteration of our 5-year Lacuna project, and that was our first solo exhibition of this work. Since then, we've been delighted to work with Kate to support and present this work as part of our wider Reframing the Border programme, which explored creative responses to the border in Ireland and featured the work of 15 artists, and we're so pleased to see some of you here today. Lacuna has been exhibited as a solo exhibition in the Regional Cultural Centre as part of a remote photo festival, at An Gallery in Guidor, at the Marketplace in Armagh City, and it's also featured in many of our Reframing the Border exhibitions and events around the borderlands. We've worked with Suzanne Lacey, internationally renowned artist, socially engaged artist, as part of this programme, and resulting from this interaction, Kate was selected for the prestigious Headlands Artist Residency in California. Most recently, Lacuna was presented as a public art billboard installation as part of our Reframing 100 programme, which featured the work of 9 artists, and this was organised in partnership with our friends at the Nair Centre, and this was organised to commemorate the centenary of partition in Ireland. So we've been delighted to work with Kate on the development of this really important and timely body of work. And so this for us marks the end of our 5-year Reframing the Border, and so we've been so pleased to have the opportunity to finally, in real life, launch this work. So thank you very much to Kate. It's been a real pleasure to work with you. And also thank you and congratulations to Irene, Buckley, composer. So I'm going to hand over to Kate, who's going to introduce Irene. And thank you all for coming to today's event. The exhibition from our collection initiative will be open to the public tomorrow, but we're going to invite artists just to come round after this event to Gallery Photography just to view your work. So thank you very much, and hand over to Kate Nolan. Well done, Kate.
Hello everyone. This is very strange to see all these people in one room. And it's a real pleasure. We've kind of gone back and forth through all of the COVID issues, trying to get to the right space and the right time to show this work. It's a pleasure to present the work Having Regard in the context of the In Our Own Image programme as well. Looking at the show outside before I came in and kind of reflecting on the history of photography within Ireland and its ability to capture all these small little moments and really momentous moments that tell us about Irish culture and Irish identity. I was looking at the Augusta Crofton Dillon self-portraits outside earlier, and they're so stunning. We have that from 1850, and then the Dennis Deneen collection from 100 years later. And now we look at where we are now with the National Photography Collection, as Trish said, is opening tomorrow in the gallery. And to be part of that and to be commissioned to create work to mark that as well as the centenary of partition is a real privilege. And also it's been a real privilege to work with Irene Buckley. She composes for silent films, so follow her, she's amazing. And this work sits within my long-term project Lacuna, which considers the effect of partition on the children of the borderlands. It's an audio and visual project working with young people from Donegal to Armagh, and has been going on for 5, almost 6 years now. I'm currently making work in South Armagh, working with a group of final year students at South St. Paul's High School. So they're working with me to kind of represent the South Armagh area, just outside of Bestbrook, which is a very interesting space. It's kind of set up as this utopian ideal, and it was based all around the kind of mill of Bestbrook, which then became a British military base for over 30 years. So Having Regard was made in the contested space of Carlingford Loch, nestled between the Cooley and Mourne Mountains, a space where C.S. Lewis was inspired to write the Chronicles of Narnia, saying, "I have seen landscapes which under a particular light make me feel that at any moment a giant might raise his head over the next ridge." Produced between lockdowns and the push and pull of the United Kingdom's first year, fully exited from the European Union. This elemental landscape looks as though time has stood still. The cyclical nature of politics around the border and the children that are caught in the middle, these were all to be considered in making this work. And I'd like to thank the Gallery of Photography truly for helping me and supporting me over all of these 5 years and showing my work in so many different ways. And my billboard in Enniskillen in the Dunn's parking lot was a highlight. And Trish as well for bringing me around the border areas where she lives and for commissioning this work. And of course the Arts Council for funding this commission, which otherwise wouldn't have been made. So thank you very much, and we'll put it over to the video and Irene.
recognizing, noting, recognizing, emphasizing, recalling, noting, underlining, recalling, recalling, noting, recalling, acknowledging, recalling, affirming, determined, underlining, recalling, having regard, mindful, having agreed upon, having regard, recalling, recognizing, affirming, recognizing, noting, recognizing, emphasizing, recalling, noting, underlining, recalling, recalling, noting, recalling, acknowledging, recalling, affirming, determined, underlining, recalling, having regard, mindful, having agreed upon,